Hi, I'm Yennefer, and this is the Fifth Iteration podcast. Here I explore patterns in thought, culture, and media using dream work, symbolic analysis, and what I call mathematics. Together, we'll see how the stories we're told shape the way we understand the world. A wise woman told me that before we were Black, we were Negro. And then I thought about it. I thought about the history that so many of us have been taught and the fact that we call ourselves Black now. But they actually gave us that label, that word in the English language. And in our recent past, African American became one of those labels. We've been Negro, and before that, we were colored. Why have the labels changed so much over the years? I remember when I began just reflecting on my self identity in the world as a freshman in college. And I remember one day I was having a debate with my friends about how we identify. And I told them, I don't identify as an African American, mainly because I had met my first real African American, one of my fellow engineering majors whose actual parents were from and born in Nigeria. And he was the first in his family to be born here in America, which made him an African American technically. So it didn't make sense for me to identify as an African American. I'm like, my parents weren't born in Africa, neither were their parents or even their parents. So I decided to call myself Black American because it made more sense at the time. And still to this day, I've spent a significant amount of time researching my ancestry, and I still haven't found one ancestor from Africa. And I think that's pretty normal for us so-called Black Americans not being able to trace our ancestry back to Africa. But the thing that I find a little bit more disturbing is that no member of either one of my families has any hint of culture that was passed down. There's no song, no word, not even a hymn or a hum that anyone has a connection to or a memory of. It's just not there. Nothing at all. And so I ask myself, how is this possible? Is this possible? How could not even a hum or a hymn make it down at least to one of my grandmothers or great grandmothers or great grandfathers? All I have is some stories that my mom would tell me that her dad would tell her. And they are Native American, those stories. That's the only connection I have to a culture. And I think that, and what I mean by a culture, I mean like our ancestral culture, not our modern day culture as Americans. And a lot of us have that same story. And with a lot of the recent rhetoric, we're beginning to shrug and dismiss our possible connections to being a Native American. I remember a while back, like a viral Instagram story where basically they were making a joke out of Black people saying that they had a Native American grandmother, which I think is really sad that we would dismiss our family stories or write them off as just trying to be better or trying to compensate for something over what our parents and our grandparents actually remember. I think that is really sad. But when my wise friend, the elder, shared that one little comment with me, it just really revealed a lot. That these are labels that have been assigned or names and renames that we've been given. And I think that a few of these may be a part of our attempt to self-identify over the generations. But the question still remains, who are we behind the labels? Aside from the labels, who are we? What are we? At any point, what did we call ourselves? And we know that there are lots of narratives out there about what we called ourselves. But I've continued to reflect on this, and one of the biggest things I had to consider was language itself. Did we speak another language? Was English our first language? Of course, I thought at some point in the lineage, obviously, our ancestors spoke a different language. None of that reached far enough down to any recent generations for me to pick up on. But one thing I do remember are the voices of my paternal grandmother, born in 1929, and my maternal grandfather, born in 1918. I remember the sounds of their voices, their dialect, and how they spoke. And they both spoke with very good English. It wasn't broken English. And another peculiar thing is they both had a bit of what I think would be considered an accent today. Their dialect was not what I would consider Southern. What we sound like today as Southerners are people from the South. They didn't sound like that, which I thought is kind of weird because they're both born here in the South. And for generations, my family has been born in the South, but their words were Southern and the phrases, but not necessarily how they sounded. And so that may reveal something about their true heritage. I don't know yet, but I still just can't forget the sounds of their voices. One particular word, I remember how my grandfather said yesterday. Yesterday. I would have to get my mom to say it, but like no one says it today, very much had an accent. And I just know that that piece of information may be trying to tell me something. So there's a lot to unpack here, and I don't know if I'll ever get to the bottom of it. However, in my research, I have learned some recent, very pivotal information that tells a different story about our past as so-called African Americans or Black people in the USA. So if you're curious about this topic for yourself, I want to encourage you to look up a woman named Dr. Marie Charles. She's a British author of Afro descent, let's say that, for lack of better terminology at this point that we are redefining for ourselves. But in other words, I'm saying that she's Black. She's a Black Briton. Dr. Marie Charles has published evidenced research on the history of foundational Black Britons and their continental cultural continuities. So I'm talking about the Dark Ages, which is a time period spanning roughly between 500 and 1000 AD. So this is over 1,000 years ago. The Dark Ages of Europe, Black folks, for lack of a better terminology at this point, in Europe were the earliest inhabitants there, and they actually laid the foundation for the culture we see today. So that means, yes, originally all of the so-called royal families were dark-skinned folks. Dr. Marie Charles has amazing work. I have bought one of her books, linked to it, but in her research, she has so many images of coat of arms with our so-called slave surnames, but with dark-skinned images dating in that time period, the Dark Ages, but these coat of arms have dates as late or as early as the 1700s. So we have coat of arms and with Black faces, with the surnames, with dates prior to this so-called slave trade. So I was just blown away by this research. And yeah, it's got me rethinking my surname. We don't have to completely reject these names because there's more to our story. The only thing dark about the Dark Ages were the people, LOL. Sometimes they will put it right in our face. But that is another story for another episode. So I'm here and I'm putting 2 and 2, maybe 3 together. And yeah, the math is just not mathing. We have Yvonne van Sertima and all the Moorish community who for decades now have been trying to tell us that there was an African presence here in America before Columbus. We have the American Indians, the Native Americans, and the Black tribes. And we have this mystery of the missing, almost non-existent slave ships. And the theory that the slave trade just wasn't as big as they claim it was. So I have to question, could there be more to our story? Could there be more to the Revolutionary War, the original 13 colonies before the Declaration of Independence? Do we have a created history on our hands? Is this the false post-war narrative that was taught in foreign sponsored school systems to the prisoners of war or the children of the prisoners of war? So another thing that I want you to look up, I want you to look up Rosenwald schools, founded by a man named Julius Rosenwald. Rosenwald schools came across my desk in the recent years, and I found out that my parents went to a Rosenwald school. Yes. So when you look up who Julius Rosenwald is, I'm not going to say that here right now. But I want you to look it up and see the heritage of this man. What interests did these people have in creating schools for Black children under the guise of, so this is who taught our parents or our grandparents in some cases. This is who taught them, and this may have been the beginning of the new history, the new narrative, a new name, a new renaming of who we are during this generation. The boomers, they ushered in the new history. So now for a few generations, right, this has gone on and it's created what we see today, a nation full of dark-skinned folks called Black with no identity beyond the manufactured legacy of enslavement, because our legacy spans far beyond the period of enslavement in North America. So the true history of our identity, I believe, has been systematically hidden and suppressed. European doesn't just mean white anymore, you guys. And the research and the evidence is out there. We just weren't taught that particular history in schools, and that was for a reason. We need to understand that this society, this nation, has a very constructed history, and certain narratives have been input strategically over the generations to have this become what it has become. So Black was just a new label for a group of people for some reason that they were bent on controlling through names and renaming and labeling to fit whatever the current narrative was. We have to consider self-identification, and we have to be honest and authentic about ourselves, about who we truly are. Are we African? Are we African? I mean, hell, everyone's African technically, right? Aren't the oldest human remains found in Africa? Isn't Africa the cradle of civilization? That makes everyone a descendant of Africa. So yes, that is true. However, beyond that, who are we? Who are our people? What was our culture, our language, our tradition, our ways? What did we inherit? What is our origin story? What tribe do we belong to? And what does it mean to be dark-skinned? What does it mean to be melanated? Why has that alone made us the target, our melanin? Why has that made us the target of other groups for manipulation and control? Why have we been targeted as somebody else's meal ticket? So was Black the name given to a conquered people? We know Black, Negro, colored were all used as political labels, but that is not our lineage. Perhaps our ancestors for plenty of generations spoke English, actually for a time. The thing is, Rose is still a rose by any other name. We've been called many names, but it's our essence that remains, and our essence that has been coveted for centuries and perhaps millennia. And the question is why? What was erased when we were misnamed and labeled as Black, as Negro, as colored, and whatever else? What was erased? Who were we before they called us colored? We've been given labels, but we already possessed a lineage. Thanks for listening. What I describe in today's video isn't new. It's the same mechanism used for centuries. Rename the thing and redirect its force. In the coming weeks online, I'll examine how the feminine divine was not only renamed, but in certain cases, symbolically regendered, a shift that reallocated authority and became the bedrock of patriarchal society. Even in dream work, dreams can subvert people as we know them in waking life. They mix, hide, or replace identities. The person you see isn't always a person the dream is about. And also, I'll show you using math how misnaming a thing will reassign its value elsewhere. This is how they do it. If you enjoy this conversation, be sure to subscribe and share. We'll continue exploring the ideas shaping our inner lives and the world around us, one rabbit hole at a time.